Hello fellow cyborgs, and welcome to another 0 by 19 update. I'm going to talk to you about the books that I've recently finished reading, the books I'm currently reading, the books I have hauled, and the books that I'm planning on reading in the future, because there is a lovely readathon happening this month in the month of April. It started on the 2nd and it will end on the 29th. It's hosted by Book Roast and it's called the Magical Readathon, or the Owls. I'm not 100%. I will link down her announcement video in the comment section, not the comment section, the description section down below, where I put all of the things so you can check it out. But it is, I'm so stoked for this. So anyway, there will be a TBR for that. Let's talk about my TBR shelves for a moment, and then I'll get into the books that I just finished. So my internet's down right now, and pathetically, I am distressed at how distressed I am. So consequently, I can't give you like an actual solid, I know for a fact what my physical TBR is, because I do not want to count them and I can't access Goodreads. It's either 90 or 89. So we're creeping down like one book at a time. I hope that I stay in the 80s for like a month or so, because I know I'm going to be buying books coming up soon probably. I have a fun trip coming up with Acacia, but hopefully I can stay. We'll find out. So anyway, I am doing pretty good at chipping away. Let's talk about the books that I have read. Slowly but surely, I got through the selected stories of Saki. I gave this collection 4 out of 5 stars. These are short stories that take place in the early 1900s in England, I think. Specifically, I don't think very many of them take place elsewhere, but Britain or the UK, if you want to be more globally thinking, or whatever. I can't do the words today. These are delightful, really funny, with often a punchline in the very last line of the story. Saki's writing style, his wit kind of reminds me of Oscar Wilde, but in a less like self-important and self-congratulatory sort of way. He also has a couple horrifying stories that like aren't funny at all. They're just like straight horror, which I was really surprised to find, but actually really, really enjoyed. So if you haven't heard of Saki, but you enjoy comical short stories that are quite short, his are like 5-10 pages, most of his stories, then you need to check him out, because he is a hidden gem, that's for sure. I picked up Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson in the vaguest sense of participating with middle grade March. I enjoyed this up until about the halfway point, at which point, in my opinion, the plot got overly complicated, and I don't understand why. Without super spoiling things for you guys, most of the characters are living in the Amazon in, I think, Brazil. This has been a couple weeks since I've read this. Most of them are from England, and for some reason it was imperative that they all have to go back to England to have a revelation of what they want in their lives. And I just thought that that trip to England was just kind of wasted time. I much rather would have had them have the revelation in the Amazon, and the last chapter being us seeing like what their life ends up being together, rather than just like abrupt with promises of going back to the Amazon, if that makes sense. So I guess it kind of spoiled the ending a little bit, but whatever. I hope you are fine with that. So yeah, this was like a 4-star read up until the halfway point, at which point I was like, really? Do we need to do that? So disappointing. Yeah, spoiler alert, a lot of these books that I'm going to be talking about, with the exception of 2, were like 2-3 stars. So I'm still not quite out of my bookish slump, though I am feeling a little bit more motivated with my reading. I also finished rereading Pride and Prejudice, which was the first Austen that I ever read about 10 years ago. I was kind of enjoying this. I mean, I'm not an Austen lover, to be perfectly fair. I've read all of her 6 novels, 6 major works at this point, but her writing style isn't my jam. I think that I would love her more had I studied her in university, but I did not, so I don't think I truly appreciate her. I did, however, like how we had the climactic engagement scene that we've all been waiting for, and we had a couple chapters to come down off that high and kind of explore some cuteness and see where the rest of the people in the cast have ended up. So I did like how we had a longer denouement than I think is usual in her books, or at least in Mansfield Park and Persuasion, from what I can remember, and those were the last 2 Austen I read before rereading. No, I read Sense and Sensibility as well, and that one I don't think had a very long denouement. So I really liked the ending, and that bumped this up from a 3 to a 4 star because the ending was really satisfying for me. And I think that sometimes with Austen, it's her writing style and her endings, like the pacing of them aren't super satisfying for me. So looking forward to rereading Northanger Abbey maybe later this year, and then hopefully rolling back around to my favorite Emma. So yeah, Pride and Prejudice, yeah, it was pretty good. I buddy read The Scapegoat by Daphne du Maurier with Acacia Ives. Her channel will be linked down below. This was kind of sloggy and a disappointing read for me. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars because it didn't suck. But the whole tension in this, the tension that's supposed to be there, is based off of like social anxiety. So reading about these awkward interactions that our character John has to go through just really like amped up my anxiety. And I also thought that at about the 3/4 mark, I was really happy with where the story was going. It made sense to me. I felt a little bit cathartic. And then in the last quarter, everything kind of gets undone, and I also didn't like how one of the female characters was treated in the last couple chapters, and it just like kind of ruined everything. So I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I think the most interesting thought in here that Acacia had and that I kind of built off of was the idea that this is like a big exploration, a big metaphor maybe, of depression. It's really obvious at the beginning that our character John is suffering from some sort of depression, but as events start unfolding, you can kind of look at them as this big metaphor of depression, like I said. So that was kind of an interesting thing to look at, but I don't think that, neat idea was enough to like save my enjoyment of this. So I'll try another du Maurier eventually, but I don't think she's going to be an author that I love either. So controversial opinion, ahoy. This is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon, and I was really disappointed in this. I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars. I feel guilty that I'm giving this Own Voices sci-fi book a 2-star rating, but here are my reasons why. The main reason I have is that I think this should have been a trilogy. The world building had so many cool details, but for the sake of the plot, they were explored for like a chapter and then not explored again. I really wanted to learn more about the intersex nature of the Tarlanders. I wanted to know more about the theology in here. I wanted to know more about the living arrangements of the lower deck people. I wanted to know more about how families happen in the lower decks, but I didn't really get any of my questions answered. I also was really discombobulated by trying to understand who the focuses were. Aster's our main character, but at the beginning of the novel, it seems like her relationship with her dead mother is the most important thing. Then in the midpoint, it seems like her relationship with Theo, her friend, who is an upper decker, is the most important thing. And then at the very end of the novel, it seems like her relationship with Giselle, her friend with mental illness, is the most important thing. And it just didn't feel cohesive to me. Talking about Giselle briefly, I was not convinced that this was good representation of mental illness, which bummed me out. It seemed like the mental illness, which was never really identified, what Giselle had, was just an excuse for her to be violent and erratic in her behavior and just kind of add an unknown cog in the machine, which is this book. And it felt like Giselle was there to just cause complications and further the plot and not to be representative of mental illness. That was like the extra cherry on top of the sour sundae. So I don't know if I had the wrong expectations. I don't think I did. I think mostly this world and these characters needed more breathing space. I think that there were too many good ideas in here for them to be fully fleshed out. So I at first was like way too invested in the character's safety and was like anxiety. And then after the halfway point, I kind of didn't connect with them anymore and I didn't care. I mean, a lot of awful things in here happen and I like the ideas in here, like I said, but I don't think it came together well enough for me to give it more than a 2 stars. I read The Red Tree by Caitlin R. Kiernan on recommendation from Maya Reads. I will link her channel down below as well. I've had my eye on this for probably over a year and I finally read it. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars as well. It was a little disappointing simply because the first couple chapters, like the first 50 to 100 pages, I was like loving it. Like I wasn't reading what the other things that I was supposed to be reading because I just wanted to come back to this. But for me, the tension never really built for this psychological horror book, which is a problem. And I'm a scaredy cat, so the fact that I felt like no tension at all for the character or felt no tension within the plot, no building sense of dread, something went wrong, whether it was with me or with the writing. I also was disappointed that the back of the book makes it sound like our main character is by herself in this abandoned farmhouse with this tree that is soaked in legend and blood. But about like 100 pages in or something like that, she gets a roommate. Now, for those of you who have read this, you can argue with me, but I wanted to explore themes of solitude in here. I thought that the psychological horror was going to come from the sense of isolation, but it didn't, which was a disappointment. So I think that that was something with my expectations not lining up to what this actually was. But apart from that, I didn't feel the tension or the dread. One thing I really liked was like the folklore and the mythology that was surrounding the Red Tree that we got to read in here. I also liked the lesbian relationships in here because I wasn't expecting lesbian representation, so that was cool. But 3 out of 5 stars, not bad, but not great. The final book that I read was The Dry by Jane Harper. This is a mystery book, which isn't my normal jam, but I heard Kate from the novel Nomad and Leanne from Literary Diversions talk about this, and it sounded really awesome. So I went ahead and picked it up, and my mom and I read this and chatted about it. So overall, I enjoyed this, but I did give it, again, 3 out of 5 stars because I found that the pacing and the sort of story that it was for 3/4 of the book was something that I was enjoying, but then over the course of the climax and then the wind down after that, it was just a completely different book, or rather the pace was different. This is kind of a slow burn, and then at the climax scene, it suddenly became like a police drama, and I didn't know why it needed to be so dramatic. It didn't really seem necessary, and it was kind of a bummer. There are 2 mysteries in here, one that's 20 years old and one that's new with people having died. The 20-year-old mystery gets a conclusion at the end of this, but for me, I thought that the way that it was revealed to the reader didn't work for me. It was revealed in the form of a flashback from the dead person's perspective. I think it should have been revealed through reading like diary entries or something, and then getting the flashback from someone who wasn't dead. The use of flashbacks in here I overall really liked, but that didn't work for me. It also confused me because is the reader the only one who knows like the details of this, or does our main character Aaron Falk, who has been wrapped up in this 20-year mystery and misses his dead friend, does he know now? And if he knows, he certainly can't prove it, so what was the point besides just satisfying me as a reader? So I had questions, and I was a little disappointed at the end. So what otherwise might have been like a 4-star book, the ending kind of like bumped it down to a 3. Still not bad. I'll read the new book eventually, but yeah, kind of disappointing too. The 2 books that I'm currently reading, even though more are on the horizon. The first is The Wind's 12 Quarters by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a short story collection by Le Guin that I've had for a long time, ever since I read Among Others in like 2013. This is like kind of, I think it's a collection curated by her. It's set up chronologically, and before each story there is a little blurb from Ursula K. Le Guin where she talks about something like the story's origin or things she had to change when it was first published or whatever. And I kind of am not enjoying the like author intrusion within this. So I've taken to now reading the story first and then reading her notes after that, even though it's not set up that way. Overall, I'm enjoying it. There have been quite a few duds in here, but a couple really good ones. So yeah, I'm plugging through. My goal right now presently is to read a short story before bed every day, and I've been like tracking it. I've been doing pretty well, but I think that will help chip away at all the short story collections that I have on my shelves. So this is the one I'm working on. I also purchased a copy of Bleak House by Charles Dickens, the new serialized Dickens along hosted by Katie of Books and Things has already started. It started last month in March, and I decided to attempt to read along instead of listen along this time because I enjoyed the first 4 chapters so much. I thought maybe I can actually read this Dickens and not just listen to the audiobook. So I'm, the first 4 chapters in, really enjoying this. I will be reading this for 1.5 years, so this will be in my videos every once in a while, updating you on my thoughts, but started Bleak House, I'm enjoying, looking forward to reading more. Before we get into my TBR and the upcoming readathon, let's talk about the books that I hauled this month. One of them was Bleak House, which you've already seen. Let me show you again. Bleak House, yay, or not this month, but just since I talked to you, Bleak House was one of them. And the other one is Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI by David Grann. This is a recommendation from Sarai Talks Books. I saw it at my local library bookstore for $3. It's in pretty darn good condition, so I said, sure. So that was the extent of the books that I picked up since I talked with you last. Let's get on with the TBR. I'm going to quickly talk with you about what the Magical Readathon is. I mentioned it at the beginning of this video. So the Magical Readathon is a month-long readathon taking place from April 2nd to 29th, hosted by Book Roast. It is based around the owls, the ordinary wizarding level exams that you find in the Harry Potter books. The idea is for you to go through the subjects of the owls, pick the subjects that you would be interested in taking were you a student at Hogwarts, and then finding books on your shelves by the requirements of the readathon that match up with those subjects. So I think for the most part I did that, though I was very aware that some of the subjects and the books related to them I didn't have books for, and I'm not interested in buying books specifically for a readathon. So I don't think I actually cheated, but whatever, it's fine. I'm going to show you what I'm going to read. So I'm going to attempt The Astronomy Owl, which is read a science fiction book. I'm going to pick Darth Plagueis, a Star Wars novel by James Luceno. I'm also going to attempt The Charms Owl, which is read a fantasy book. I picked up a middle grade fantasy. This is Princess Nevermore by Deanne Curtis Reagan. The Herbology exam challenges you to read a book in whose title is a nature word. For that, I'm going to be picking up my new acquisition, Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI by David Grann. This is a recommendation from Sarai Talks Books. The History of Magic exam challenges me to read a historical fiction. I'll be reading a historical mystery. This is And Only to Deceive by Tasha Alexander. Tasha, good. My mom is currently reading this. This is one of the 2 mysteries that I picked up in my last video I talked to you about. So she's going to finish this, and then I will finish it, and then we will chat about it. But yes, historical fiction. I will also attempt the Muggle Studies Owl, which is the challenge of reading a Muggle nonfiction. I've got kind of a Muggle nonfiction. This is The Ultimate Harry Potter and Philosophy, Hogwarts for Muggles. It's part of the Blackwell Philosophy and Pop Culture series, and it is edited by Gregory Bassam. So these are philosophical essays, all to do with Harry Potter. I thought it would be super thematic. So I'm going to be working on this throughout the month. And finally, Transfiguration is the final owl that I will be attempting. The challenge is to read a book in which people are transformed, things are transformed, shape-shifting happens, or to read a book with a cat on the cover because McGonagall transfigures into a cat. I've got double trouble. This is The Cat Who Wished to Be a Man by Lloyd Alexander. To my knowledge, a cat turns into a man in this book, and bonus, there's a cat on the cover. So I thought this was perfect. So these plus the Ursula K. Le Guin short story collection are what I'm going to be attempting to read in April. I think it is incredibly doable considering I have 2 middle grade and the rest of them are fairly moderately lengthed reads. So wish me luck in my OWLS exams. I love this readathon idea so much. It's just so adorable and it makes me feel like I'm back in school. So that is my update for you on what I have been reading. Like I said earlier, it's still been kind of more duddy books than not, but I'm feeling a lot more motivated, which is awesome, and I think I'm emotionally out of my reading slump, but still no 5 stars. We're into April, and still not 1 5-star read so far. So we'll just have to see what happens for the rest of the year. Please let me know how your reading goals are going. Have you hauled things that you're regretting or hauled things that you loved? And how has your reading been going as well? Have you been meeting your goals and all that stuff? Can I say goals one more time? Goals. Until next time, continue reading books that you love and continue to be lovely.